Friendship. Friends, the word friends, I think the etymology comes from the Anglo-Saxon, and it is indeed a very distinctive feature of Anglo-Saxon derived societies, what I call, after Jim Bennett, the Anglosphere, that friendship is a central institution. I think in my own life, friends have certainly been the most important and are the most important people in my life, including my married friend, Sarah Harrison. And this I'd taken for granted. I'd been through a long education in friendship and so taken it as normal. That is to say, when I was a baby and a small child in India, my parents, my mother and others had encouraged me to make friends with anyone who was around, including some little Indian children, one of whom became my best friend, I'm told. And then in the letters it expresses delight that Alan has made a friend and so on. When I came home to England, I started to make friends quite soon in Dorset, and in particular at my first boarding school, at the Dragon School, friendship became really, really important. You were thrown into a dormitory with boys who you'd never met before. You were in a class, you were in a rugger team, you were in the playground with all these other little boys. And very soon you realized that your life depended on making good choices about friends. You had circles of individuals. You had 2 or 3 or 4 really good friends. These are the people who would defend you, who you could tell your worries and anxieties to, the ones who you delighted to hang out with and play games with. And then you had a dozen or so people who were quite good friends, part of the gang, but not very close. And then others you treated carefully. You liked some of them, you didn't like others, but you couldn't really say they were your friends. And it's significant that in the book that we had, the last of the school books that we had when we left, there is signatures. There is a page of signatures of masters. There's a page of signatures and names and nicknames of people in your class. And then there's a page of friends. And there were about this sort of circle of about a dozen, as I recall, friends. And so we were learning the art of friendship, how you make a friend, how you lose a friend, what a friendship is about. And the same continued even more so into my next boarding school between the age of 13 and 18, because it was here that you really made your lifelong deep friendships, or 1 or 2. And again, it was a matter of rings. I can name the 3 best friends I had through my school days. The friendship started in the first year. They were my year mates, and 3 or so out of 15 that came up in my year became really close friends. And they were distinguished from others, for example, by the fact that you went to their homes and they came to your homes during the holidays. So you continued the friendship, and you went on longer expeditions with them. My best friend, a Canadian boy, I went on my first long trip abroad, hitchhiking through France and down to Italy and back through Germany with Ian, both of us wearing kilts to get good lifts. And I remained a friend with him until more or less his death, writing letters occasionally. And the letters with him, until we were married certainly, are really intense. We talked about our love lives, our religious doubts and so on. So friendship there was the central thing. And it was around the teenage years that friendship became more important than your family. You had your brothers, sisters, and your parents, grandparents, but the people you really hung out with and thought about most were your friends. And that became even more so at university, where the same rings of friendship occurred, and you made friends again for life with people from quite different backgrounds. Many of mine in that generation were from grammar schools rather than public schools, and you also started to make really good girlfriends. Now, there's girlfriends of the kind who are where there is no obvious sexual erotic relationship at all. They are just people you like, and you treat them more or less as your male friends, but they are female, and so there's no real difference at all. And I had half a dozen at least really good girlfriends of that kind. And then, of course, real girlfriends, that is, there was an erotic relationship as well, two of those serious ones throughout my undergraduate days. And they were both people you liked to snuggle up to and kiss and the rest of it, but also friends. You discussed everything. You shared your souls with them. And this is what real friendship meant. Now, I took all this for granted and later learned that I could be friends even with my one or two close relatives, one of my sisters, and particularly my mother. We turned from being mother-son to being friends, and we later wrote books together and we did research together, and she became one of my best friends. And I took all this for granted until I became an anthropologist and looked at other societies. And there I found that this sort of institution of friendship, upon which much of my work is based, through friendship, working with other people, writing books with other people, going on anthropological tours around different societies and entering into them through friendship better than any other way. All this is unusual. Most societies, you have close relations with close family. Outside that circle of family, you have strangers, and strangers, particularly in peasant societies where life is very insecure and the state is marauding and there's little legal security and so on, those societies, you don't make friends. You certainly don't make friends with people of the opposite sex to yourself. You don't make friends with strangers unless you set up a sort of partly family relationship. You can adopt or set up a kin relationship, as I've seen in many parts of the world, with someone, and then you trust them. But without that, you don't trust them and you don't spend time with them. So friendship in these societies and in a number of tribal societies, so places like India and China, not a big deal about friendship at all. And yet, strangely, when I went to these places, Nepal, Japan, India, I made really good friends. And indeed now, I should think 75%, 80% of my really close friends, that is a dozen or so, are from these cultures. A couple from Japan, 3 or 4 in Nepal, and half a dozen in China. And they are the people I really like to spend time with. They are the people who I feel that we are sharing a growth together, that we have the same sense of humour, that we like to do the same things, that our values are overlapping. And it's very strange, and one of the wonders and the greatest delights, as Confucius said, to find and meet a friend from a very different and distant civilization, and yet to find, when you meet them again, that you can pick up the threads, and that despite that cultural difference, and maybe a difference in sex and social background, class, everything, you can become a friend. And so friendship is something that is an art. You have to learn it, as I learnt at schools, but once you have mastered the basics of it, it can, more than almost any other activity of humans who are very social and gregarious creatures. It can enrich one's life. So I wish you a very happy Easter with your friends.